Good morning, everyone. Thank you, National Institute of Organized Research, for this wonderful opportunity to speak on a very important topic that is considered as one of the goals to sustain, one of the goals by UN in order to sustain appropriate developmental structures in a society. So out of many such sustainable goal developments that UN follows, I select goal number 5, which is gender equality, which I would like to present through my way of teaching as well as education, how gender equality is very important, be it in workplace or in language or in terms of social existence, in order to have a very important sustainable goal development structure within the society that is progressing. And I just take some minutes in order to present my slide. Okay, I just hope that my screen is visible. The topic I'm to talk about today is how gender equality is very important while we use English language. So English language is considered as a benchmark, and it also a mark for any official purpose. Now, there are certain words which is very important to understand, and the certain ways of expression which is very important for us to get, that is gendered, and how using such kind of words can often lead to gender discrimination in multiple spheres. And just to get that how it is important for a sustainable development, I have particularly selected English language and gender equality as important topics to discuss. The aim of this research is to see how gender equality is can be not to understand how to get gender equality through the use of English language, and a look at gender discourse of English language. Understanding Otto Jespersen's concept of reciprocal influence of language and its personality on the speakers, we can find that language and culture has integrated itself into complex and dynamic structures, and that frequently sparks certain desires and structures of language system. Now, understanding why gender equality is important in the structure of language, because to remember Gayatri Chakraborty Spivak's understanding of power, she says, and I quote her, "Power is nothing if not opposed to what it is not. Makes the latter's form of expression concretely possible." Unquote. That means the power around body politics circumfuses with the essence of ethical, ontological, and the social cultural dynamics of linguistic politics. And henceforth, language becomes a structure which just says that what the language must not signify, puts men and women into the structure of what language should signify through women and through men. That means every time men using the language or any powerful identity using the language would stand to be different in comparison to any other, quote unquote, other identity using the language. And henceforth, the understanding of language, how it oppresses, controls, orders, denies, accepts, silences, voices, suppresses, frees, above everything, constructs a binarized strategical order of existence. Understanding language, this is very important, because being a part of academia has often inspired me to talk on gender equality in different aspects. And since we are progressing towards sustainable goal development by UN, it's very important to understand that the language we use as a medium to share our knowledge is also very gendered. And if you are looking for gender equality, which is goal number 5 of the sustainable development, we should look for gender equality in every aspect. And henceforth, today's speaking and today's sharing of knowledge comes completely on English language and gender equality. Now, to understand language, it's very important to see how reconsidering English language within Indian context is important to understand the duality of the structure. The multiple spell or the multifarious sui generis structure characters of global language often exists as a historical idea of colonialism. And the understanding of English language as a lingua franca also helps us to understand how language is an extraordinary receptive and adaptable heterogeneous structure. As per Rain, who stated this. Now, gender differences, which are socially and culturally constructed, are one of the interesting phenomena in contemporary society. Now, putting language for communication and gender differences in light, we can also understand how gender identities are different in different ways of communication, and therefore the treating or the treatment also appears to be different. Gendered language, and I have tried presenting a picture of it, which states that why it is not talk-tick that sounds right, and why it is TikTok that sounds right. And if this article is read clearly, you're going to see that the difference between genders in using language for communication comes from the understanding or sources from the understanding of what the same-sex peers, women, will use in positive politeness, and how the tendency of the structures, conversational implicature, and interpersonal exploration functions as straight factual communication. So this article clearly states that ever wondered why we say TikTok and not, and it's take time to read it, not talk-tick, or ding-dong and not dong-ding, king-kong and not conking. Turns out it is one of the unwritten rules of English that native speakers knows and without knowing. The rule explains in BBC article, and I quote that, if there are 3 words, then the order has to go I-A-O. If there are 2 words, then the first is I and the second is either A or O. Mishmash, chit-chat, dilly-dally, shilly-shally, tiptoe, hip-hop, flip-flop, tic-tac, sing-song, ding-dong, king-kong, ping-pong are all other examples of this. Now, coming to this particular line which states that it has to go in the order I-A-O, I come to the understanding, or we should come to the understanding from gender equality perspective, that this I-A-O order is where the I is always the most strong and the most popular identity. It is always the most centered identity, and henceforth it is, if we could see, it is always men on the left and any other identity on the right. So the ideal that we consider to be compared with is men. That is the reason we are always striving for equality in pattern or in level to men. But the problem is that we should get equality in terms of human beings, just not a particular identity that we consider to be ideal. This pattern of I-A-O that the English language follows is the place where the I is always given to the politically dominated and celebrated identity. And that is what I had to, or rather I wanted to present through the idea of gendered language, or language is itself gendered. Now, understanding the position of women through language is an idea of kneecap. Kneecap is nothing but making your sentences more emotionally innovative and add intensifiers, precise colors, hypercorrect grammar, just for the avoidance of certain kind of strong voice. The concept of women's language only highlight the existence of difference between man and women. And in order to understand, as stated by Lakoff, who is one of the greatest tendency of women is using lexical hedges or fillers. And he says that by giving certain examples that, you know, sort of, well, you see, this kind of things. And also, women generally use in their language tact questions. She's very nice, isn't she? Also gives high intonation. It's really good. Empty adjectives, divine, charming, cute, precise colored terms, magenta, aquarine, intensifiers, gesture, so hypercorrect grammar, consistent use of standard verb forms, super polite forms, indirect questions or euphemism. Instead of saying the person is dead, they use euphemistic structures of language. Avoidance of strong swear words and emphatic stress. And the article that I've tried giving, or an example over here, is that very clear example that makes me uncomfortable. Women generally tends to say that sort of makes me uncomfortable, giving them an emotional structure, an emotional tone, making their identity quite suitable and adjustable to what the society expects. But that is not possible every time. If we are learning and fighting for our equality and our development, we have to avoid kneecapping our terms and sentences, even through language. Passivity and women in linguistics. The understanding of linguistics as a power part is very important if you have to talk for Foucault, because Foucault says that power produces, and I've quoted that also, hopefully. And henceforth, power operating in anything produces and categorizes identity, rule in norms of cultural dominance, of which English language is also a part, and hence the communicative terms are gendered in different separated ways for women, queer communities, castes, disabled people, and many other forms. The passivity and the understanding of passivity in the women in linguistics comes from the source that the passiveness and the tentativeness of women in communication are affirmed by Van Woesen in his article, who states that women likes using question tags like I may be wrong instead of saying I'm wrong, and avoids directive statements. Instead of that, they try using questions like won't you open the door or won't you close the door. This kind of phrases basically decreases the perceived assertiveness, because women are expected not to be assertive. They're expected to be more passive. And this pattern of differences often helps them to sustain, which is very wrong because they are oppressed in their sustenance. Certain examples of a dominated culture, communication style in a phallogocentric order. Certain examples are this. Phallus-oriented style says, focus on information, report style of speaking, goal-driven, single task approach, succinct language, walking towards a destination, need to know other answers. The other style that the women are expected to perform is focus on relationship, rapport style of speaking, process-oriented, multitask approach, storytelling style. On a journey, want to ask the right questions. So the other style is often performed by women, and they're expected to perform the other style. And this left side, I have deliberately selected this order of speech or the communication on the left side to show that how English language expects and rules and politicizes this left side as the ideal, and patterns and works on this entire structure as comparative analysis to the other style of language, which shows that how gender is completely unequal through the use of English language, and the English language is such a gendered culture. Conclusion is, it is very important for us to understand why gender equality is important. Gender equality is important in every section so that we can mark the absence of discrimination and oppression in our society. Because United Nations have often functioned and is trying to find for a goal and look for a goal and function towards a goal that could lead to development in each and every section. And that is the reason one of its important goal development is number 5, which talks of gender equality. And henceforth, if we have to talk of gender equality, there are many colors of gender equality in terms of work, in terms of institution, in terms of education, in terms of language, in terms of politics. So selecting language, why I decided to select language as today's discussion or the topic of discussion is because language is the basic medium. And that is the reason it turns out to be a very important part. And if we don't select language only and understand how gender is unequal in language and language is itself gendered, then maybe our struggle and fight towards gender equality in association with UN's one of the goals of gender equality will remain incomplete. And hence it is very important to understand that the differences of men and women in the communication style may affect the expectations of men and women in various fields of life. Because of those differences, men and women are treated differently. In terms of leadership, for example, women may be ignored for higher positions because of their emotional language. To remember Mahmoud, who actually wrote it, he stated that in a field of organization, it's shown that the capability of men and women to be a leader may be affected by notions of emotional women's language. And henceforth, differences in gender may be a surrogate for differences in job function, level and hierarchy, proximity, work group composition, numerical balance, and status quo. So it's very important that in order to fight for gender equality, to survive and to look for a sustainable goal development, we understand gender equality in all forms and gender discrimination in all forms, of which language and gendered ideas is a very important topic to discuss. Thank you so much. I end my slide.